Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana, and we're here today with special guest, Sarah Platt-Finger, who's here to share with us her new book she co-authored with Deepak Chopra, Living in the Light, Yoga for Self-Realization. Now, are you looking to reach your highest potential and cultivate a deeper understanding of yourself? I've often heard people talk about living the philosophy of yoga beyond the mat, but most people don't even know where to start. And today, Sarah is going to share that with us. Now, Sarah Platt-Finger is the founder of Ishta Yoga LLC and the private instructor of Dr. Deepak Chopra. She has shared the elevating tools of Ishta worldwide through trainings, retreats, and workshops with her husband, Yoga Master Alan Finger. Sarah and Dr. Chopra have collaborated on several projects, including Finding Connection Through Yoga with Yoga Journal and Radical Being. She is a featured yoga teacher on the international stage with Chopra Global and on the YouTube channel The Chopra Well. So welcome to the show, Sarah Platt-Finger.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
What an honor it is to have you here and to talk about your new book. What inspired you to write this?
Well, honestly, I have to say it was my co-author, Deepak Chopra, who kind of inspired this book to come into fruition. I'd been working with him, sharing my yoga teachings with him for about 8 years when he suggested that we create a book together on the depths and full spectrum of yoga, and sharing the practice of yoga, not just as a form of physical well-being, but of self-realization. And I felt so honored to be a part of it with him.
Well, so glad you both wrote this book, and I can see where he would be an inspiration for that type of thing. So the book cover, it's beautiful. The title's Living in the Light. So when we talk about that, how does that relate to yoga?
Well, yoga, in a sense, is bringing us back to the light of our essence. And yoga is also a practice of helping us to awaken to the different aspects of our being that we don't regularly see. So it's kind of moving from unconscious to conscious. It's a very, there's an ancient hymn or chant that is about transitioning from darkness to light, which is also similar to transitioning from untruth to truth and from death to immortality. So from the ancient Vedas, which are the ancient scripts of yoga, there has always been this reference to the light, because when we are in the light, we are in the truth of who we really are, which is not a limited form-based being, but a being that is filled with potential, that is all embracing, that really has no beginning and no end. And when we reach these higher states of consciousness that much of the ancient and authentic teachings of yoga talk about, we realize that we are, in fact, beings of light. But we can start, regardless of where you start in your yoga journey. Sometimes that light is just shining an awareness on maybe a part of your body that you didn't know existed, or a muscle that was dormant before and is now awakened, or maybe it's patterns in the way that you're holding your body up, or patterns in the way that you're thinking or breathing. So there's many different aspects that we can talk about the light in this practice, depending on where you're entering the practice from.
So how long have you been practicing yoga?
I've been practicing for about 25 years now. And I've been teaching for about 20 years, coming up in the spring.
Right. Well, congratulations. And I know that you're Dr. Deepak Chopra's private instructor. That's just so profound, I think, in many ways to be able to be in that space.
Yes. And I shared this a lot when I first had the opportunity to teach him. It was a little daunting to me to think of teaching someone as prominent as he is and as wise and prolific as he is, and a sort of mentor slash teacher of mine gave me this really wise advice. And she said, you don't have to think about it as teaching him, but that you're sharing the teachings with him. You're sharing the practice. And as soon as I shifted my brain from teaching him to sharing with him, it took some of this pressure off of me. And it was really more about sharing what I know to be the lived experience of yoga, which I could access very readily. Yeah.
Well, and yoga is such a personal journey. And I think a lot of times, if people aren't aware of yoga, they think it's all exercise and maybe there's some philosophy that's in there, but not really that it could be a path to self-realization.
Yeah, this is true. We all start our journey somewhere, and certainly in the West, much of the yoga practice has been focused and emphasized on the physicality of it. And that is what we call a limb of yoga. If we think of the full spectrum of yoga as being 8 limbs, you can think of each limb as like a color of the rainbow. So the asana, or the physical poses, are one limb or one color of the rainbow, but not the entire rainbow itself. So, but because we tend to be more, or we tend to gravitate a little bit more towards the physicality of the practice, that's where our culture has really focused. But I think as people enter the practice from a physical place, they start to then experience the subtleties of it and experience the shifts that it creates, not just in our physical body, but in our mind and our nervous system and in our awareness in general. So it's a little bit of a journey. But I think that ultimately, with regular attention to the practice, it guides us into our own self-realization.
So in the book, you talk about royal yoga. So what is that?
So royal yoga, which in Sanskrit is Raja Yoga, that is what we are referencing when we talk about, as the analogy I used before of the rainbow, the full spectrum of the practice, including, so there are 8 limbs of yoga, and the first 2 limbs are what are known as the yamas and niyamas, and Deepak has translated those to the social and emotional intelligences of our being. And there are 5 social intelligences and 5 emotional intelligences. And when we understand these intelligences or codes or ways of being, they help us to live in the light. So the 5 yamas are ahimsa, having a peaceful presence or non-injury. And I'm using Deepak's words now in the translation. So you have a peaceful presence, and then ahimsa, and then satya, which is truthfulness, living in absolute truth. Then we have asteya, which is non-stealing, but we like to translate it as abundance consciousness, understanding the depth and abundance of your own nature and being, that you don't have to compare and compete with others to access the depth of your gifts. After asteya, we have brahmacharya, which is the management of your own vital, sexual, creative energy, utilizing your creative energy to enhance your own sense of self and others to move towards an elevated state of being. And then we have aparigraha, which translates to non-grasping. So it's allowing our entire experience, the reality of our experience, to arise and subside without clinging or grasping. And then the 5 niyamas, the first begins with sausha, which is cleanliness, but we like to translate it as mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual hygiene. So having a practice of eating cleanly, purifying, being clean with the types of media you expose yourself to. We're in a world where we have a lot of exposure to different sensations and sensory impulses. So what we're exposing ourselves to can be toxic. So being clear about what we are ingesting and taking in, whether it's the food that we're eating or the sensory images we're exposing ourselves to, the relationships that we're in. We also want to have a regular spiritual hygiene where we have like a daily routine where we connect to something higher or something greater or more expansive than what our minds and our bodies are used to identifying to. So that's sausha. And then we have santosha, which is contentment. We can think of that as fulfillment of our own being fulfilled in our lives, but also recognizing that we're not the doers in the end. And there's always a part of us that has to be content with the things that we can't control. After santosha, we have tapas, which is often translated as heat for purification. Deepak, which I love, he likes to translate this as a level of sacrifice, right? So we have to be willing to sacrifice the sort of ego-based self or the limited self to experience something greater and more enhancing or eternal, right? So this idea that, and also tapas can be thought of as moving against what is habitual. We tend to be very governed by our habits, and those habits can either be conscious or unconscious. But when we are able to apply tapas into our lives, we can start to move against what is habitual and open up to new, sometimes scary, awkward, uncomfortable situations. And then following tapas comes svadhyaya, self-study, studying the part of yourself that is not just thoughts or preferences, but the part of yourself that is infinite and unbounded, having moments where you dwell there every day. And the last of the niyamas is called Ishvara Pranidhana, which is surrendering, as Deepak likes to say, surrendering to the wisdom of uncertainty, being okay with that uncertainty. So those are the 5 yamas and niyamas. And then we have the third limb is asana, which is the physical poses, your seat of awareness or consciousness. And the whole second part of the book I've dedicated to the power, practice, and prayer of asana. After asana comes pranayama, which is the extension and direction of the life force energy within us. Following that is pratyahara, which is drawing your senses inward, experiencing your internal body, your internal space. Once we can do that, we can start to shine the light, bring our attention to different aspects of our being, which is called dharana, effortful focus. Then we can be more effortless in our focus, experiencing levels of consciousness like we do in meditation. That's dhyana. And then the last limb is samadhi, which is absorption of our awareness. It's like a drop merging back into the ocean, where you, as your limit, as our sort of individual spirit or self, our own personal drop, merges back to this ocean of intelligence that we're all a part of. So those are the 8 limbs, and that is what Raja Yoga or royal yoga is, experiencing those 8 limbs.
I think it's so important to go over what the foundations are. So thank you for taking the time to share that with us. I think one area where people tend to maybe get a little confused is that they think that yoga is a religion or a belief system, but it's neither of those, right?
Yes. Yeah, it's so important. It's a practice. It is an action that we take. Often thought of as a science, really. When you come, let's say you have a yoga mat and you come onto your yoga mat and you do the practice and you practice these limbs, you shift the way that you experience reality. And that is essentially the science of yogas. The formula are these 8 limbs, right, that I just outlined a moment ago. And the sort of result, if we want to talk about the result, is a state of being that is more awakened. We use the word awakened a lot in spiritual circles, but it's sort of a metaphor for when we are awake, we are alert, and we are ready to see things in a new way. When we're asleep, we're not awakened, or we're not ready to see things as they are. So in a sense, it's awakening to a new reality, and one, hopefully, that is not based on suffering and limitation, and mental, not feeling uninspired mentally, but feeling like we have a potential, a new way of living and existing. And so there's a level of sort of hope in the practice, but it will only happen when we do the practice, right? When we take the action. So yeah, it's a little bit different than believing in something or even studying something, or reading up. Of course, I'm basing this on the book, but the book is specifically presented in a way that allows the reader to do specific exercises and practices so that you feel the embodiment of it and the living of it.
I was so impressed. There's so much in your book in just one paragraph that was kind of getting me. You talk about how we are always, basically our nature is light. And I think a lot of times people may have a hard time maybe identifying with that because they flip somebody off on the freeway in traffic, or cut somebody off, or, they're yelling at their neighbors, or whatever the deal is, but there are things that happen throughout our daytime, through our daily existence, that make us feel like, well, we're not so full of light.
Exactly. And if we look back at the Yoga Sutras, which are really the foundational text and the text that we are basing this book off of, the sutra is a thread or an aphorism, and the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali is a text that was written about 2,500 years ago, and there are 196 of these threads or aphorisms that help to explain the condition of the human mind. And it's very relevant today, as relevant as it was, a couple millennia ago. It's amazing how little the human brain and mind has changed over time. But one of the things that Patanjali talks about is that we are born into this space of kind of infinite potential or possibilities. So if you look at a little baby, a small baby as an infant, and you see it, it doesn't have the impulse to flip somebody off on the street, right? Or it doesn't have that sense of like, oh, I got to pay the bills tomorrow, or this happened and that happened and my day was so rough. No, it's just pure presence. An infant is just pure being. We were all that state of being at one time when we were born. What happens is we become exposed to the conditioned mind, right? Culture. And it gives us words and it gives us language and it gives us constructs. And that is as it has to be. Of course, we have to have that in order to live in a society and follow through on the responsibilities we have on this plane of existence. But we also have the opportunity to take moments to be still, to practice yoga, the 8 limbs of yoga, and experience and return back to that pure being that we once were, and rest there for an extended period of time. That is what we would call the state of samadhi, is sitting quiet for an extended period of time and not identifying with ourselves as our career or how much money we have or what we look like or anything that is measurable, but move into the part of our being that is immeasurable. And when we can experience that for an extended period of time, then hopefully we can bring that into our everyday living. And we might have the impulse to flip that person off in the middle of traffic. And maybe at a time or two we do. But hopefully we have just a moment of discernment where we realize that that person that cut us off in the traffic, or that this traffic jam that we're stuck in, is temporary. And it actually is not part of who we are. And us as the driver, we're that taking on that identity in that moment, but that is also not the totality of who we are. It's just a kind of mask or act that we are endeavoring in this moment. But we can have moments of remembrance that we are the light. We are the pure being. We are the essence that we were, or that our small infant children are. And we have the capacity to go back there in small moments and of time when we experience the depth of yoga.
Can royal yoga be used every day to kind of help us live on a better plane daily?
Yes. So I think that is definitely a part of what Deepak and I are sharing in this book. And we both have a regular daily practice that we come back to every day, because it's that easy to forget. Our practice, in a sense, is a remembering, right? It's a remembering of that beingness or the light within us. Our senses and our mind is that seductive. It will really seduce us to forget the truth and essence of who we are. So we need to, just as we brush our teeth and we have our daily routines that we do to take care of our physical bodies, it comes back to that kind of spiritual hygiene. And it is also mental hygiene, because we're also taking care of our mind. And we are taking care of our physical body when we have that daily routine of yoga, breath work, and meditation.
Are there certain gifts that we will get, and we don't necessarily do it for this, but certain gifts that we'll receive from doing royal yoga?
It's the gift that keeps on giving, because it's within you, and so when you tap into that reservoir within you, it's like it's accessible to you at any time. I think we often think gifts are outside of us, but they're actually within us. And when we practice mindfulness techniques like yoga and meditation, we become more aware, and there's this word awakened again to the gifts that are available to us every day and in every moment. So sometimes it's simply the gift of waking up and hearing the sounds of the birds in your neighborhood, or watching the sunset, or experiencing a connection to a loved one. Those are all gifts. But there might be other gifts that come, like in the form of, opportunities that maybe we didn't enable or allow ourselves to open up to before we started having a regular daily practice.
In your book, Living in the Light, it talks about how royal yoga is the highest and most important of all the yoga traditions, and how it's an all-embracing path to personal transformation that reaches beyond any approach to wellness and healing that exists today. So as we start this practice of royal yoga and we pick up the book Living in Light and we're working through this, how long do these practices take in order for us to get to a place where we're feeling the benefit from it? And is this something that we have to spend hours a day on?
It's a really good question. I always say, it's kind of like money in the bank. If you collect a quarter every day, eventually, over time, you'll have a big chunk of change, and you can convert that into dollars and put that towards something else. And it accumulates over time. So we don't have to necessarily raise the bar too high when we're starting a practice of yoga. Even if it's just 10 minutes a day, come onto your hands and knees and move your spine a little bit in two directions, or, move from side to side. Come to stand on your feet and feel what it feels like to stand evenly on your feet, and to align the different segments of your body, and just feel your breath as you stand there, steady, balanced, and centered. And just simply doing, 3 movements like that can help you to change the habits in your body, to create structure in your body. And then having some kind of breath-based practice where maybe you're just becoming aware of your breath and sitting and watching the breath. And maybe having a few moments of sitting in stillness. You can do all of that in 10 minutes and really start to change the way you're experiencing your everyday reality.
In your book, you talk about our interactions with other people reflects a lot about us. And I was like, ooh, isn't that right? So if someone's having discord in all relationships or some relationships, is this something that can help them? And what are some of the practices maybe they should do?
Yes, absolutely. And I thank you for asking this question, because I think it's something that gets lost a little bit. We think of yoga as very much, and it is traditionally a practice of the self. We say from the Bhagavad Gita, it's a practice of the self, through the self, to the self, which I love. But we can't dismiss the benefits we get in our relationships when we are tending to ourselves, because of course the self is the first relationship, well, aside from our caretakers, but it is a lifelong relationship that we have, the relationship to the self, and how we are interacting and speaking and listening or not listening to ourself is a reflection of how we are able to extend a level of compassion and kindness and conscious, active listening to others. So I do think that it begins within, right? The dialogue and the language and the space that we're holding for ourselves as we become more accepting and compassionate and open and tolerant and inclusive to our own experience, we can extend that generosity to others.
They always say it's an inside job.
It is. Yes, it is. But I think also to really, I also want to add the point here that, and this is where I think the power of asana, the poses, becomes very poignant, because different shapes that we're creating with our bodies opens us up to experiencing different modalities in our mind. So I can create a shape in my body where, say, I'm working really hard and it feels a little bit strenuous. And that can be similar to a situation in life where I feel a little bit of strain and I'm having to work through and find a way to feel ease in that. And it's the same thing with vulnerability. Some poses open us up to a space of vulnerability where we feel like, oh, I'm exposing myself in a way where I'm not really used to this, but I can create a safe space inside of myself to experience this vulnerability. And it's the same thing in relationships. Being in relationships requires vulnerability. It requires us being able to take risks and feel awkward at times. And the yoga poses do that for us as well. Some poses make us feel very awkward and very unusual. And so we can take that experience into our relationships as well.
So when we talk about this journey that we're taking through living in the light, is a lot of it about our perception about ourselves and the world?
Yes, it is all about our perception, actually. Because as soon as we change our perception, we change our reality, right? Like we change everything just based on how we're seeing the world. And what we realize through the practice of yoga is that we do have the power and the choice, right? The ability to change the way that we are perceiving the world and each other. And I'm very inspired by the way that I think the world is shifting a little bit more towards a new way of perceiving ourselves and each other. We sort of had to do that during the pandemic. We were forced to shift the way that we perceived the world. And sometimes we have those disruptors and it forces us to see things in a new way, but we can also allow those opportunities to happen within ourselves every day if we open up to it.
I think that's so important. There's so much that has happened over the last 2 years. Even though there's a lot that was heartbreaking, there's also a lot that gave us an opportunity to learn about ourselves. So when I have friends that go with me to yoga and that have never tried, the common thing I hear is that, well, I've never tried yoga. I'm not going to be any good. My body's not flexible. I can't even touch my toes. So what would you say to those people that are just unsure if this is something they can even start?
Yeah. I love this because, one person said once, and I don't know who is the originator of this quote. It is not me, but I do like to say this, that if you can breathe, you can do yoga. You don't have to have a stretchy body. You don't have to be able to touch your nose to your toes. You do need to have a level of awareness. And even that, like we are born into awareness. We have this capacity in our mind, the prefrontal cortex, that allows us to be reflective. That's why we are able to experience this practice in the way that we are, why humans do it. And of course, our dogs and our goats can do it too. We don't know if they're necessarily moving to the same level of awareness. But being flexible is not a prerequisite. As we continue and do the practice, we find that we are able to open up the body in a new way. And as we open our body and move with more freedom and mobility, it just it opens us up to joy. We feel more joyful when we can move freely. So that is part of it. And of course, there's the sister science of yoga, which is Ayurveda, which I won't talk about in this because that's a whole other conversation. But part of that practice, that science of self-healing, is about creating a healthy body through movement and conscious good eating and eating the right kind of foods for our own nature. And that all helps us to move towards the state of self-realization. But you don't have to touch your nose to your toes. That's not it.
Thank goodness. Yeah. I mean, I've done yoga, but the nose to the toes thing, I don't know about that. I don't think I can do that.
Yeah.
And I think.
Yeah, and if I can just add one other thing that I meant to say also is that we all have different bodies, right? Different anatomies, different bone shapes and densities, and that is unique to each one of us. So that is why it's also important as we move the body to understand what our range of movement is and limitations are, and just find our own personal edge in that space. So you're connecting to the sensations in your body, you're listening to the sensations of your body, you're holding and breathing there. And that is the yoga. It's not about an end result. It's about an experience you're creating in that moment with your mind, your body, and your awareness.
Well, thank you for taking the time to go over that. I've often heard that how our bone structure really dictates how much of different poses we can do. And some people, they're just not able physically to do that. Their bone structure will not allow it. So do you have a practice you can share with us right now that will not put us to sleep? We have some people driving, people at work, some people at home, that would work for everybody and that we could do right now.
Okay, so easy to do if you are driving and you're sitting in traffic. The first thing I would tell you to do is to sit upright, to feel the bottom part of your seat, which is called your sitting bones. So you can kind of adjust the bottommost part of your pelvis and feel your sitting bones, the bony parts of your seat. You might need to adjust the flesh of your butt a little bit to do that. And then lengthen up through your spine. So once you feel the sitting bones, you can then begin to lift up through your spine and relax the tops of your shoulders. So then you'll start to feel a steady, easeful seat. And when you do that, you'll start to feel a little more alert, a little more awake in your seat. Every once in a while, when you're driving, adjust and try and feel the bottom part of your pelvis, your sitting bones. And don't use the back of your seat. This is the same if you're sitting in your chair at your desk or at your sofa. Every once in a while, try and sit up tall on your sitting bones and don't use the back of your chair or your driver's seat, but sit up nice and tall. And then you'll start to use the muscles of your core, right, that help you to sit properly and stand properly and avoid lower back injury. And simply sitting like that is a very simple thing to do in your driver's seat that doesn't involve too much negotiation of your body. And you can also do a Ujjayi breathing. You can breathe in through your nose, take a big breath in, and then exhale out through your mouth and listen for a whispery-like sound. And see if you can go to the very bottom of your exhale. And do that again, breathe in fully through your nose. Open up your mouth and exhale. Listen for that whispery-like sound. And then partway through, close your lips and still hear that whispery-like sound at the back of your throat. It's like a narrowing of your vocal cords. And then keep your lips closed as you breathe in through the nostrils. And now keep the lips closed and narrow your vocal cords as you exhale. And that is a really nice way to lengthen and extend the breath helps to calm anxiety, restlessness, and it also stimulates the vagus nerve, which is the 10th cranial nerve, which is what we call the healing nerve, and it helps us move into our parasympathetic state of rest and digest.
In your book, you talk about how when our breath is strong, so is our prana. What does that mean?
So are not necessarily strong, but lengthened, because we want to control the breath, not necessarily force the breath. Prana is the vital energy, the life force energy that feeds our brain and our heart and our nervous system. And so it really animates and enlivens us. And so it rides on oxygen. So as we take in more conscious, full, complete breaths, we also are bringing in that vital life force energy and enabling it to feed our hearts and our brains and the different organs of our body. So we feel more vital and alive. The prana also moves through the channels of energy that map our body called the nadis. And from a kind of yogic and Ayurvedic perspective, when those channels of energy are blocked, the prana can't flow. And that's when we have what's called dis-ease, a lack of ease, or dukkha is the term in Sanskrit. When the prana is flowing through the nadis, the channels of energy of our body, we feel sukha, which is a word for sweetness, ease, or joy. So yeah, we want to try and keep our breath steady, easeful. It adds life to our years and years to our life, quite literally.
It seems that most of us are not taking full belly breaths, but are kind of using upper respiratory breaths.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times even holding our breaths throughout the day.
Yes. Yeah. So just every once in a while you can pause, feel your sit bones, or if you're standing, feel your feet, because it is important to feel the physical body first. And then you can take a fuller breath in. If we're collapsed, the lungs aren't going to be able to expand as fully. They might move more into the back of the body. We want to feel the breath three-dimensionally, front, side, back of the body expanding. So you can take a deep breath in and breathe into the top of the inhalation, and then even maybe count the breaths to the very bottom of the exhalation. So you let all the air out. And even just one full, complete breath can help reset your mind and your nervous system.
Now, how important is this practice for us to meditate? Do we have to do this for like hours on end, or?
Yes, and you have to go up to the top of a mountain to do it.
Oh, shoot. I don't live near a mountain.
No, well, it's not going to work then. Sorry. No, actually, meditation is, it's something that's gaining so much more interest and research and scientific data that's coming up to support the benefits, the health benefits of meditation on our mind, on our physical bodies, on our digestion, so many, our mental health. So again, it's like money in the bank. You just need to do, maybe a minute or two of sitting. And I know Deepak practices techniques where there's a mantra, repetition of a mantra, which can be really helpful if you have one mantra that you repeat, or maybe it's just following your breath, watching your breath rising and falling. 2 minutes a day. Just start with 2 minutes and see what changes. And then you can slowly add a little time in here and there. But you don't have to do it for hours and hours, and you don't have to sit in silence struggling. That's going to defeat the purpose. We want it to be joyful. We want it to feel nourishing. Otherwise, it's just another chore. So we can take the pressure off of ourselves that there's one way that it has to be. Enter in the practice in a way that feels organic to you, whether it's breath, movement, meditation, relationships, but find an entry point in and start there.
Oh, what great advice. Thank you for taking the time to go through that. I know there's so many things that we have to pay attention to. And a lot of times, especially when we have a busy lifestyle, it seems that taking care of ourselves is kind of on the back burner, especially when it comes to sleep. So how important is sleep with this practice?
Absolutely. And that also comes into the practice of Ayurveda, which is the sister science of yoga. But health is definitely, sleep is definitely a pillar of health and wellness that should accompany a daily routine of yoga and meditation. If you are depleted in sleep, having a meditation practice will help you to recover some of the, brain capacity and our fatigue. But we do want to supplement our yoga practice with sleep hygiene, which would be a minimum of 7 to 8 hours of sleep per night.
So, Sarah, what do you want readers and our listeners to take away from your book, Living in the Light?
I hope that people can read this guide and realize that enlightenment is not for the special elite, evolved beings in the world. Being awake is available to each and every one of us. We all have the technology, and it's called the human body. Human body is a brilliant, fascinating technology that can enable us to both calm, quiet ourselves down, to awaken, to energize, but ultimately to experience the source of who we are. And it requires a little bit of a commitment, yes, but what we're doing essentially is coming home to the safety, the joy, the abundance of our own human body. And that is available to each and every one of us. And when we experience that, then I think we can experience a level of acceptance, love, and compassion for each other and the body of our planet. And that is the first start. It's just taking the journey in.
Well, that journey of compassion can be very difficult for a lot of people. I know some people have a hard time showing that compassion to themselves. And then if we add our neighbors, the planet to this entire mix, it can seem so overwhelming for people. So it's so nice to have a practice that can help us get there in living in the light. And we don't have to become a meditation master in order to do that. Well, my goodness, Sarah, we could talk for hours. I just loved your book, Living in the Light, Yoga for Self-Realization. Where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community and learn more about your work?
They can follow me on Instagram. It's Platt, Platt, Finger, Finger. Same on Twitter. Or check me out, find out things that are happening on my website, which is sarahplattfinger.com.
Well, I've been to your website, I've signed up for your newsletter, and you've got so many great things coming up. And I'm just going to kind of brag on you a little bit here. You have on March 11th, Living the Soul Intentions. And that sounds like such a great place to start a journey. Also, you have the Sedona Yoga Festival coming on up on April 27th. On June 12th, Seduction of Spirit in Hawaii and Mexico. Ooh, that sounds like fun. And then on September 9th, Silent Awakenings. And that'll be in Texas. And you've got tons of other events coming up as well. And for people who maybe aren't able to travel due to work or what have you, you have all these great online courses, which I was so impressed with. This course you teach with Dr. Deepak Chopra really caught my attention, and it's Finding Connection Through Yoga. You have another class called Chakras 101, Unleash Your Wisdom and Vitality. You have free classes at ChopraWell, which, so anyone can join at any place. And then you also have your YouTube channel, which has tons of resources on where to start. And the classes I've started to go ahead and use at home is the classes you offer on your website for Yoga U online. And it gives so many practices. People can just start where they're at. Just absolutely love that. Well, Sarah, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
It's such a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you, Sarah. It has been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, Living in the Light, Yoga for Self-Realization. Living in the Light's available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie retailers. You can also purchase this book from Harmony Books, which is an imprint of Crown Publishing Group. And remember to support our indie bookstores. If you don't see the book on the shelf, just ask for them to order it. You can learn about this book and all the classes, workshops, and retreats that Sarah's doing at her website at sarahplattfinger.com. Well, on that note, we're going to pause here for a quick moment. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne. We'll be right back after these messages. I'd like to thank Jason Eastwood at Guitarfulness for sharing his inspiring music and talent with us. His music is known worldwide for cultivating atmospheres of harmony, inner peace, and clarity. Visit Jason's website at guitarfulness.com. Join his newsletter, be part of his community, and download his music. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.